Okay, maybe it's time for us to get started. I'm Jack Condon, and thank you for coming to this session of Tutor Talk. This morning, we're going to present the Reading Horizons Elevate program to you. This is the teaching tool that we're using on the literacy side of the program. Since SBLC was founded 33 years ago, there have been two halves to the program. The one half that we're all familiar with is ESL, and the other half is literacy. And on the literacy side, we are teaching students who speak English but cannot read or write. And that includes, many Americans who actually finish school, but functionally speaking, they just can't read or write, even at a third grade level. So this is a program that has been in use now for several years, and everyone on the literacy side uses it. And it starts off with recognizing the letters of the alphabet and their sounds, and builds from there. So this is a response to the request of many people to know a little bit more about what happens on the literacy side of the program. And this morning's presentation, it's going to be presented by Marianne Donahue. And then we're going to have an opportunity to talk. And we very much like to hear your comments. We originally started off to just satisfy the curiosity of people who had asked, what's going on? But then we began thinking, well, as we went back over the program, we saw that there might be some components that we actually could use on the ESL side. We actually buy a license for each person. So it's been a very individual thing up until now, but we'll have a chance to talk about that. So we're really fortunate to have Marianne presenting to us. She's a longtime user of the program, has taken many students through it. It's a great advantage over the previous program, and she'll tell us more about it. Marianne, you want to take it from here?
Thanks, Jack. Yes, I have this opportunity to talk to you about the program, which I found really useful. About 8 years ago, we realized in the literacy program that what we were using was not being as effective as we would like it to be. And we wanted to find something that had that was more up to date, that had feedback built into it so that you'd know what the student was getting and not getting. And also something that would do the student interaction, more interaction for the student, because we were using videotapes. And we wanted something that would engage the student physically in the process, besides just answering like in class. So we made a committee and looked on the internet for everything that we could find that was available to us. And this is the program that we chose. So it's not rocket science. It's just the same basic things that all of you teach, but it's organized in such a way to help people who don't know the sounds of the alphabet and so forth to start and work their way up through all the things that you need to learn the English language. So let's see where we're going to start. Oh no, that's not what we want to see. There it is, okay. So I started off just with a definition that Reading Horizons is that we're going to explore it a little bit. It's an interactive computer program, which was very new for our program. And we had a lot of, let's say it was a challenging startup because we had to get all the tutors up to speed on how to use the program. And then we had many students who weren't really that computer literate. So we had to teach them the basics of using the mouse and using the keyboard. But you really just need very elementary skills in order to use this program. And it's meant to be an interactive program to help teach the reading skills to the students. Okay. It's built so that there's an intentional sequence. And as they will tell you on the video that we watch, it's not what you're teaching. There are lots of programs that have phonics as their base, but it's how it's being taught. And this is being taught from the very simple, complex, simple aspects to the more complex aspects. So as soon as a student opens up the program and does the first lesson, they're already asked to interact and to answer questions and to find things. So immediately you know that the student has to be engaged because they have to pick up the work. And also the advantage of that is that you can see immediately whether this is getting to the student, whether they're understanding or not. They start with the sounds of the English language and then go to the letters. And then the way that letters join to make new sounds, or sometimes they join just to be together and make blends. And then it goes through all the things that you need to learn. And they start out with only the short vowels, and then they add the others in as we go along. So it goes from the simple to the complex, as I said. And what it does is it teaches you how to break down the parts of the language. You begin to see what patterns there are. And you break them down to pronounce. You learn that very early on, that you have to look at the letters or the combinations and so forth on how to pronouncing words. There's a lot of emphasis on that. And the unique marking system, which you will see in the video, is meant to see with a physical response. The student needs to mark those things so that it gives them another way of remembering rather than me just telling them, well, find what's the verb. They have to go to the word and find the verb and make an X underneath the verb. And they have to find the short vowel and make the right mark over the short vowel. It has 5 phonetic rules that they will teach us and 2 decoding skills, both of which will be explained a moment in the video rather than me explaining them. And the thing that I liked best about it was that the student initiates and types the responses. So it's not you watching to see if the student is drifting off. They can't really drift off very well on this one. So it was very helpful in that way. Okay. Now we'll hear from Reading Horizons and I'll interrupt them.
Reading Horizons is an explicit, systematic, sequential, and multisensory phonics instructional program. While we address all the elements of the reading pyramid, our main focus is on those foundational pieces of phonemic awareness and phonics, because when there is true automaticity in those, then everything will rise naturally in the way that we would hope to. It is far more, though, about the process than it is about the content. You can have phonics in place and have it not necessarily be effective. It is the way that it is instructed that makes the difference. It has to be explicit and systematic and sequenced in a fashion that is logical, that starts with the simplest concept and builds to the more complex. Reading Horizons employs a unique and simple marking system. There are no unnecessary markings. It is very simple. All of our markings either determine pronunciation or movement and syllabication. The marking system helps students see the parts and pieces of the words and know how to pronounce them. When they are empowered with these strategies and with that marking system, they're able to access words in an entirely different way and truly become successful readers. In the following videos, we'll explore the key aspects of the Reading Horizons methodology. We start with the simplest concept first, the alphabet. Next, we move into instruction of the blends, the 5 phonetic skills, and the 2 decoding skills. We then build on those skills by teaching murmur diphthongs, digraphs, and special vowel sounds. When instructed sequentially and systematically, this method empowers students with strategies to be able to prove those words regardless of length, and that changes everything for them and sets them on a trajectory to be successful readers.
Now, the important thing I thought in there was I should say some words about the alphabet. You might think, well, my student knows the alphabet. What would they need to go do this for? And the program will adjust to where the student is. And I'll talk to you more about how we get that information into the computer. But the computer adjusts to where the student is. If they know the alphabet, they're not going to make them go through the long lessons that teach them the sounds of the alphabet. They'll do a quick summary lesson. And there are often holes in students' learnings, even as far as the sounds of the English language. I have never met anyone who's come to this program who actually knows what are the short vowel sounds. Most of us are mixed up on what's what and regional accents and so forth. So it's really very helpful in that way.
The alphabet is instructed in letter sets, 4 or 5 consonants with 1 vowel sound. We do pretty much traditional vowel order, but a few things are changed very intentionally on our part. We teach the letter identification, the formation of those letters, and move into pronunciation by chunking those together in slides and building real words. We also teach a CK spelling skill at the end. Once they learn all their vowels, they're ready to spell correctly with C and K, because K will take I and E, and C will take the other 3.
It's very entertaining in this program that they have little jingles like that. You know, maybe when you were in first grade, you learned when silent E at the end I see, the first vowel says its name to me. Well, they have this updated CK opportunity is something that I never even knew. I've been going through school all these years, and I wouldn't have known how to explain a student except to say that's how English is. But so they try to highlight anything that's an exception or an unusual way to put something together. It's the thing that is very good about the program is that it actually explains all the different exceptions and brings them to your mind so that you're aware of them and not just surprised by them.
Blends are 2 or 3 consonants standing together that retain their own sounds and will move together in syllabication. A great way to identify the blends is that they must be able to begin a word and will usually contain the consonants L, R, or S. In the Reading Horizons methodology, we use the mark of an arc underneath combinations that either create a sound together and or move together in syllabication. We place an arc under the blend to identify it in single syllable words, and then that it will move together in a multi-syllable word. See if you can identify the blend in this multi-syllable word. The blend.
GR.
Okay, let's see if I wanted to just point to the marking system, which starts at the very beginning. And you can see that, you know, there's a method to the madness, and the student will start marking in the first lesson and then continue on. And each week it becomes a little bit more complex. There's something else that you need to mark. And then you're reviewing the ones that you already learned. So there's a constant process of review and reinforcement of what's a verb, what's long, what's short, why is it this way? So provides that support to learning.
Phonetic skill 1 helps students identify that when we have one consonant following our vowel and nothing else, the vowel will be short. We mark the vowel underneath, come up and around the end of the word, and when we see that one consonant with nothing else, we identify it with what we call a guardian star. That lets the students know that when they see that guardian consonant following the vowel will be short. See if you can prove the pronunciation of this word using phonetic skill 1. Again, we mark the vowel underneath, come up and around the end of the word, and when we see the guardian consonant, we know that the vowel will be short.
And you saw there, you saw in that phonetic skill 1, that immediately you're looking to see, how do I know if something's long or short in a word? And I know that there are plenty of other ways that you teach this, but this is how the way that it's taught in this particular program. And it seems to be effective with students. They seem to get it, and through the repetition, they begin to be able to identify where the vowels are.
Phonetic skill number 3 helps the student identify that when a vowel.
Sorry, I missed number 2.
Phonetic skill 2 helps the student identify that when there are 2 consonants following the vowel will be short. Staying consistent with our process, we mark the vowel underneath, come up and around the end of the word, identify those 2 consonants by putting guardian stars on them, and that indicates that the vowel will be short. See if you can prove the pronunciation of this word using phonetic skill 2. Again, we mark the vowel underneath, come up and around, and when we see the 2 guardian consonants, we know that the vowel will be short.
And that concept of guardian consonants is started very early in the program, and it's continued on till about the second to the last lesson. And by then you assume that the student will remember the guardian star. And so it makes it less cluttered by the time you get to the really long words.
Phonetic skill number 3 helps the student identify that when a vowel stands alone, meaning it has no consonants following it, the vowel sound will be long. We mark that vowel, and once we realize there are no consonants following it, that tells us that that vowel sound is going to be long, and we can mark it as such. See if you can prove the pronunciation of this word using phonetic skill 3. Again, we mark the vowel underneath, and when we see that there are no consonants following it, we know that the vowel will be long.
And you see there that at this point, when we're on the second phonetic skill, the third phonetic skill, we're learning what makes a long vowel. We've just been working with short vowels for the first 2 lessons, the phonetic skill 1 and phonetic skill 2. Now we're looking at, well, how do you get long vowels and what are their sounds?
Phonetic skill 4 teaches that when we have more than one vowel in a word, and one of those is an E at the end of the word, that E at the end will be silent, making the previous vowel long. Again, we mark the vowels underneath. Once you realize that E is at the end, we can indicate that it will be silent by putting a line all the way through it. Because of that silent E, we know our vowel will be long and can mark it as such. The consonant in between will not be a guardian because that E follows it, and that's what makes the vowel long. See if you can prove the pronunciation of this word using phonetic skill 4. Again, we mark the vowels underneath. When we see that the E is at the end, we put a line all the way through it to indicate that it is silent. Now we know that the first vowel will be long.
And the highlight of that particular lesson I wanted to point out is that you have a way of marking your silent letters. And when you get to more complicated things like IGHT, you learn that in that particular structure, you go and you mark as silent the G and the H. So you've already been accustomed to using it ever since this particular spot, that you know that there are going to be in English some vowels that are silent.
Phonetic skill 5 teaches that when 2 vowels are adjacent or right next to each other, that second vowel will be silent and that first vowel will be long. We mark the vowels underneath and come up and around the end of the word. We identify that the second vowel will be silent by drawing a line all the way through it. That tells us that the first vowel will be long. See if you can prove the pronunciation of this word using phonetic skill 5. Again, we mark the vowels underneath, come up and around the end of the word, and put a line all the way through the second vowel to identify that it is silent. Now we know that the first vowel will be long.
And here you learn that sometimes when you have 2 vowels together, you would look at it and you would know that because one was silent, that it's just the long sound. Or otherwise, you might think it's me, at, me, eat. So it's very specific so that each thing you're learning.
Phonetic Skill 5 teaches that when two vowels are adjacent or right next to each other, that second vowel will be silent and that first vowel will be long. We mark the vowels underneath and come up and around the end of the word. We identify that the second vowel will be silent by drawing a line all the way through it. That tells us that the first vowel will be long. See if you can prove the pronunciation of this word using Phonetic Skill 5. Reading Horizons teaches students 2 decoding skills for syllabication. It shows them what patterns to look for to know where to divide a multisyllable word, and then they're able to prove each vowel sound within each syllable according to the skills they already know. Decoding skill 1 is still staying consistent with our process, marking everything underneath the word left to right first. But once we realize we've got more than one working vowel, we're going to change our process slightly. We're no longer going to come up and around the end of the word. We're going to come back to that first vowel that we marked and look at what's immediately following it. When we have one consonant following that vowel or in between our vowel sounds of that multisyllable word, then we will apply decoding skill 1, and that is that one will run. That one consonant will move on with the next vowel. So we will divide in front of one, and then we're able to prove those vowel sounds within those syllables according to the skills that we know. See if you can decode this word using decoding skill 1. Mark the vowels underneath. Move back to the first vowel. When we see that we have only one consonant following the vowel, we know that one will run, and we divide in front of the consonant. Decoding skill 2 is the same process, working underneath the word left to right. Realizing we've got more than one working vowel, we will come back to that first vowel and look at what's immediately following it or in between our vowel sounds. Decoding skill 2 tells us that when we have 2 consonants following that vowel or in between those vowel sounds, those 2 will split. And then again, we're able to prove those syllables according to the skills that we know.
And this is an early lesson in the first chapter where you're learning that words have parts that can be broken down into, so that your attack skills for learning how to pronounce a big word are simplified down to little pieces that you can take apart.
See if you can decode this word using decoding skill 2. Again, mark the vowels underneath. Move back to the first vowel. When we see that we have 2 consonants following the vowel, we know that 2 will split when we divide between the consonants. Reading Horizons teaches the 42 sounds of the English language. One of the sounds that we teach are the murmur diphthongs, or the R-controlled vowel. When a vowel is immediately followed by the consonant R, it produces a new vowel sound. We mark that by putting an X still underneath the vowel, but arcing that unit together because that's what produces the vowel sound. Then we're able to identify that within single syllable words and within syllables of multisyllable words. Can you identify the murmur diphthong in this word? Murmur diphthong is you are. It makes the sound.
And so once again, you're being showed early on in the program that vowels, there are 42 sounds in English and there are 26 letters. So how do you get 42 sounds? And it's because there are certain rules like this where the sound of the vowel changes depending on what follows it. And so you're beginning to integrate the fact that you have these murmur diphthongs that change the way the vowel is pronounced.
Another of the 42 sounds that Reading Horizons addresses are the digraphs. They are 5 new sounds created by 2 consonants together, like CH, SH, WH, and the voiced and voiceless TH. We indicate that those are digraphs by placing an arc underneath them. That lets us know that it is going to create a sound together and move together in syllabication. We also address 5 other digraphs that are simply new spellings for sounds we already know. Can you identify the digraph in this word?
Yes.
The digraph is SH. It makes the sh sound.
And here you're learning that some of the vowels that you come across as the consonants S and H make a new sound together. They don't sound like the S, they don't sound like the H, but they sound like a new combination. And you're learning that the curve underneath joins them together. But that's the second thing you've learned, that a curve joins together. If you'll remember, we had blends. So it's always important to review what the difference between a blend and a digraph is.
Special vowel sounds are another part of the 42 sounds that Reading Horizons addresses. At first glance, they look like adjacent vowels. However, they function very differently. Those 2-letter combinations together create their own unique sound. Students are able to identify this by placing an X in between them and arcing those 2 letters together. They learn 2 different spellings for that same sound. One spelling will be found at the beginning or middle of words, and the other spelling at the end of words for that sound. Can you identify the special vowel sound in this word? The special vowel sound is OW. It makes the ow sound.
Okay, so what we have then you all hear that? No? It must be on my speaker.
We can hear you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is there can you hear the music in the background?
No.
No.
Okay, then that's my problem. Okay.
I can hear you. I can.
Okay.
Now I hear music.
Transfer card. Transfer cards.
Obviously something else opened up.
Practice in transferring.
But I don't know what it is.
If everybody could put their Zoom on mute, that might help.
Coordinating with each chapter of the instruction.
No, I think
And
it's
for
me.
each skill, there are 12 different cards. So each student will have multiple response opportunities.
Okay.
Students can use transfer cards individually, in pairs, or even in small group centers. Here are
You
some ideas for
You
how
still have a window open in YouTube, I think, Marianne.
I know, but I don't know how to
Yeah.
get.
A sheet of paper and a
Let's
transfer
see what
card,
could be
and
here.
have them pick a column from the card to write and decode. Then
Oh,
collect the
okay.
finished paper so you can check for understanding. You could also have students play 4 corners. With a whiteboard or paper that looks like this, have each student pick a word from the transfer
I see what
card
I did,
and
but I
write it
can't
in the
do
middle circle. Then in each of the 4 corners, have them complete an activity. They could mark the word, draw a picture to represent the word, define the word, and use the word in a sentence. Another activity that students love is called teacher-teacher. Each student takes turns acting as the teacher, while the other acts as the student. The teacher will.
Okay. Thank you for your patience.
We've all done it.
That's the way all my online classes are.
Yeah.
Oh my God. This is particularly difficult because I'm using a new mouse on my husband's computer, and it's very hard to control compared to mine. Let's see. Okay, now we want to go on to the second pictures of this. Okay, I wanted to talk just for a moment about the features before we go on. One of the things that's really important in the way that this is put together is the fact that each student has an evaluation done at the beginning of the process of intake. So, you know, the way Lainey does online, that evaluation of where they are in the English language, we do something similar on where they are in the English language, except this would be for English-speaking students. And it's a lengthy assessment. I've been doing these assessments, and one or two other people have been doing them. And we meet with a student, preferably in person, but sometimes online. And they have two parts of the evaluation. The first part takes all the lessons that they're going to teach in this program that we just were looking at, you know, when is it long, when is it short, when is there a double S, and puts those in a about 40-minute multiple choice questionnaire that the student answers by interacting with the computer. Then you have what I consider the really hard part of it for many of our students, which is the reading library assessment. And the point of that will be to give the student a Lexile number, which will put them in a what we call maybe a grade level. And all of the reading passages are labeled with a particular Lexile number, so that the reading passages that are shown to your student to select from will be reading passages that are within their immediate ability, that they're not given any that are too hard or too easy. So the computer adapts is what I'm trying to tell you, according to the materials that are put in the assessment. Also, the assessment is wonderful for the tutor because you have a printout that you get at the end, besides the reading level, of all the skills that you're going to be teaching and which of those skills the student either seems to know or doesn't know very well. They rate them from 25 to 50 to 100%. So you have that at your side also, which will help you as you go through a lesson. What do you need to take more time with that lesson or less time? And then the student gets immediate feedback, which is another thing which I really liked about this. The student, you saw the way that the teacher talks. Well, it's similar, except it's a little more casual on the actual video. But she talks and shows the process. Then immediately the student is given exercises to apply that. And they are stopped after each one. If they get it correct, they're given an attaboy. And if they're do it incorrectly, they say, give them a try again, or not quite, or whatever. And so we keep working at it until we get the one. And that's where the tutor becomes involved in explaining why it's different than the way the student thought it might be. We're kind of honing in on a particular skill. And the lessons can be repeated fully, or you can do a brief review. If you go through the whole lesson and the student still just doesn't seem to have it, you can go back and either do a brief review or you can go through the whole thing again. So it's self-feedback on that. You get ongoing process reports. As the student does the program, you can look up their particular progress on their name or as compared to the class. If you have a class of students, you'll get the name of every student in your class, and then you will see how the students are doing in each area that you're teaching. So you can see, well, is my class all coming up, or do I have a few people who are behind, or where are things? And then you know where you have to put more emphasis or do review. It gives us testing at regular intervals. There are a couple quizzes in each chapter and a chapter test. And then about chapter 3, chapter 6, there are an evaluative test again to see how they've done with the skills. The reading library is very interesting. It has 300 passages that you go to, and you can choose from easy to hard, and they're made to be interesting to students. You know, they're topics about things that are pretty much in the news and things that people want to read about. One of the things I learned about there that I'd never heard of was planking, which is apparently people going to the mall and doing planks with their bodies. And this was a big thing for a while. So they'll put in fads so that the student will read about something that's in the world culture right now. Let's see. Usually when you're doing the lesson, you'll spend part of the time in the lessons and part of the time in the reading library. And this is where you would begin having the student begin to get more fluency and ability and vocabulary in the language. The pronunciation tool you saw briefly as we went through is and I think you've probably seen this in some form or another, where they show them a diagram of the mouth and the throat, and you see what the letter looks like in each of the places where you have to put your tongue, or where you have it, whether you're using your air in your throat or whether it's an open or closed. So that's something that you can take your student to use if there's letters that they're having difficulty pronouncing. And then finally, there's a grammar and punctuation basic lessons. And those are interspersed throughout. They're not required. And what we usually do is we go back after we finish the program and pick up the grammar lessons. Now, if you really want to get into grammar, Jack has a great book that you can use. This will give these particular lessons give you a very short snapshot glance at each thing that you look at. And the kinds of things that you would look at would be intonation and syllable stress, contractions, capitalization, sentences, conjunctions, alphabetical order, determiners, commas, adjectives and adverbs, and prefixes and suffixes. Okay, now I want to take you to something that addresses ESL as a possible area that's where students might be able to use this. And then I'll have Jack talk a little bit about the student that he and I have worked together with using the Reading Horizons Elevate for an ESL student. So this is a little video we found that talks to you about a student who's learning, an ESL student who's just started using Reading Horizons.
This is the first year I've been using Reading Horizons with my class. I got people who are first grade level, and I've got people who might be on a high school level in the same class. My job is to make them better.
I came here 2005 March, almost 10 years. Yeah, I became a US citizen 2012. I just want to go to school to study. I don't understand because so difficult. It's not easy.
I was a little surprised with the light. I've had her in the past and she hasn't done as well. But now being able to do it on her own with Reading Horizons, it's almost like the teacher is there.
Reading a horizon, I like it. You know, I love it to study, to reading right now because I understand more.
She'll come in at the beginning of class and she'll say, I never knew there was a rule for this. And I say, what rule is it that you just learned? And she'll tell it. So we put it on the board and her enthusiasm transfers.
I think about go back 10 years ago. If I had this lesson first time I do every time, I think I did much longer to learn more English.
I also do this other program where we read some stories and they do some writing. They can write any story they want. And she wrote this whole story about Reading Horizons and about how excited she was about that.
I want to talk about Reading Horizons program. Reading Horizons is helping my life. Reading Horizon program is very good to get stronger and reading and more spelling too. It helped me a lot and I want to say thank you.
I've been a reading teacher for over 35 years here. And Reading Horizons has actually filled a niche that I have not been able to fill. I'd say it's a great way to individualize your classroom for those students so they can get what they need.
Okay. So those are the materials. I wanted to just say a couple words that you can see that we have in our program an array of students. We have varying levels of education, and we have English language skills that vary. A lot of our students who are from Asia have had college education or high school or college, and they have studied grammar for years. They just can't talk it, but they know the structure of the language. Some of our South American and Mexican folks who come in have no idea of a grammar and the tools that I was just talking about. So it's a good supplement for some folks to learn these things that they never learned in their own native language. So between the two of them, these holes might be identified and filled in. So Jack, if you'd like to say a few words. Or would you
Yes.
like to ask for questions first, either one?
Yeah, let's have a couple of questions first, please.
Okay.
Yes. I can't see. Michael.
It's
your
still.
wife.
Yes, my wife has a question.
Hi, my name is Martha, and I teach ESL at Glendale Community College. So
Great.
I'm learning, I'm really learning. So thank you, Miss Mary Ann. When you said planking, students are planking, what does that mean?
I didn't know what it meant either. It means you do like in yoga, a plank, where they would have called it a push-up in back years. You know, you're on your toes and you're on your arms this way.
Okay.
And you go to the mall, a whole group of you, and you all plank at once in the mall.
Oh, I see.
And that was
Okay.
an early version of group meet at the mall and do something like a dance or whatever.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
So, yeah, it keeps me up to date.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, our experience, Marianne and I, began in this way 3 years ago, or at the beginning of the pandemic. Deborah Hawkins sent me a student as an ESL student, but when I talked to him, he was pretty fluent, and it became apparent that his real problem was that he couldn't read or write. And he had a very specific goal that was to make more money, to get to a better job. He was stuck in an overnight shift at a minimum wage with no opportunity for advancement. And so we started off, we only were able to meet once a week because of his work schedule. He worked a lot. So since we could only meet once a week, we did as long as a 2.5 hour session, which is a long session on Zoom. But he was making good progress, and we just kept on going. And then he moved to another job at a higher wage. And all along the way, he has shared his hourly wage with us. So this is truly objective. I don't know how much more objective you can get than this. But anyway, he progressed very well. And then as we get to know each other better, he really had another goal in mind that he hadn't mentioned at first, and that is that he had 2 daughters, one of which it was already beginning in high school. And he could see, that they were obviously reading at a much better level than he was. And he didn't want his children to have a father who was illiterate. So another goal emerged, and he made it more concrete by saying, if he became a citizen according to our laws, which I didn't know, his children could glide right into citizenship easily. So this was a further goal. So he's moved again, and each time he's taken a step up, and now his goal is to move up where he is, and he's begun. They've asked him to take on more responsibility, so he's had a very objective, positive, upward path. This is a good time for me to express my gratitude to Marianne, because I knew nothing about the literacy side, and Marianne was a veteran already, and she stuck with us, or co-taught, or basically taught me RHE, and we both taught reading to our student. So that's the story. Now, we'd be very interested in hearing your stories and your reaction what you saw today. I'd like to say, by the way, before we begin, that if you felt bad about not knowing the 5 phonetic skills, or remember diphthong was, and stuff like that, I had no idea before we began this program. Now, you know, they must have taught me the phonetic skills somewhere along the way, but I never heard of them as far as I can remember. So anyway, don't feel bad if any of this was unfamiliar to you. Who would like to make a comment?
We have a couple of hands up. Sheila, go ahead.
So Marianne, I have a couple of things, questions. It sounds like the student has homework. So, how many hours would you say that they need to spend on doing it on their own? Number two, Jack mentioned he had once a week for a long time, but on average, how many times a week are you teaching it? And for how long is each session? And then do they take the tests on their own and then you go over the results, or they do it during your class and you review it with them? So those are my questions.
Okay, well, first of all, with homework, that's going to be up to you and the individual student. One of my frustrations with teaching people who are LES students is that they are very, very chaotic lives mostly, or very busy lives, and they're unlikely to do much homework. And I've just had to come to accept that. So what it looked like in there was that the teacher was in the last video was giving this extra material to the student to do on her own, which a student can. And I have a new student right now who went through the special education system and is now in her late 30s and is running a business and wants to be able to read novels and nonfiction books. And she feels like she was cheated of part of her education. So she called me this week and she said, I'm not going to be able to come to class this week because I've got that that's going on, but I will do the 2 lessons on my own and then we'll pick up next week. So it just depends on your student. And then secondly, when do they take the tests? They take the tests with you as you go along in the process. And you have to be really careful to keep your mouth shut. So that it's a test and not another lesson. Because the point is to test their, you're used to interacting with the student and clarifying and so forth. And that's particularly toxic when you're doing the reading library. If you interfere by talking or explaining a term, that will give them a lower score because it takes them longer to read the passage. So just have to remember you're doing that. And then there was one more question. I think she asked a 3-part.
How many times a week and for how long? How many?
Traditionally, LES has done 2 hours twice a week. What I found is that that worked fine for in-person. It does not work fine online. It is too exhausting for me and the student. So we're now doing 1.25 hours about twice a week.
Thank you, Marianne. Marianne Tiola had a question.
I have a couple questions. Okay, but I'm not going to ask them in sequence. I'm going to ask one at a time. What's the length of each lesson?
That's totally up to the student. How much can they do? How long does it take them to get through it? How many of the answers that they're responding to are correct or incorrect?
Okay, so if they're doing like 45 minutes, then the next session, it picks up from where they left off?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, what's the length of the program? Is this a year program if they're doing it once or twice a week? How many lessons in total are there?
There are 96 lessons, and then there are about 20 extra grammar lessons.
Okay.
And if a student is really sharp, they can do it fast.
So some of these lessons they could do on their own?
Yeah, some of these classes they could do on their own.
Okay, and then my last
I would say a year.
How would this work for a student who's dyslexic?
Yes, that's who it was aimed towards. We had to pick a program that was aimed towards some people who had been through special education, because a lot of ESL, LES students that come in have been special ed. They're not
Oh,
developmentally delayed. They just have
right,
certain
right.
blocks. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at dyslexia. Okay, thank you. Perfect. Wonderful.
Michael, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Thanks for taking the time. So just of curiosity, as my wife mentioned, she teaches at the community college level. She teaches online, but the students are basically in the Glendale area, Burbank area. And a lot of these students really should not be at the level one they're at the college level. They're far below comprehension level. Would those students apply, or do they have to be residing in the South Bay area?
Lainey, I'll turn to you for that.
Yes, we tutor any student who lives in the United States.
Okay.
We tend to give priority to the South Bay residents, but it's first come, first serve usually, and I do the best I can assigning, so I don't spend a lot of time on looking where they live. But yeah, definitely we could take more students who live in the Glendale area. I have to tell you that we have a huge waiting list of students wanting a tutor. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So I would add to that too. If your wife knows of tutors that have people that have experience, you don't have to live in the South Bay. You can tutor over Zoom. So we are open to volunteers for tutoring as well. As Lainey said, we have a big backlog.
Yeah, and if your wife wants to tutor with us or help us out in any other way, she should apply too. We'll use her.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lainey. Bethany had a question. Incidentally, before you speak, Bethany, let me just say, you can put your hand up at the bottom of the screen by just clicking on the little icon there. And we've started to use this. We're kind of getting good at this. And it enables us to be sure that everybody who wants to be heard gets heard. Bethany, go ahead.
I see. Yeah. Thanks. I just had two questions, one of which you just started to address, but how do we access the program, and is there a waiting list if we want to get a student involved with the program? So that was question one, and I'll pause there before I go into question two.
Marianne, do you want to take that?
I think I didn't understand. You said because of the length of the waiting list, how long does it take?
No, how do we access the program so that we can begin using it with a student? And is there a waiting list? I don't know how much access we have to the program.
Okay, you would go to our website,
Mm-hmm.
and from the website, there's it guides you to put an application in for learning or for being tutoring. There's two different sections. Help me with that, Lainey. Right on the website now, I just looked at it, the new one. It's very clear where you go if you want to be a tutor, and it's very clear where you go if you want to be a student.
Oh, I see.
And then you have the opportunity to put in your make a phone call. You can call in if you're not a person who's very computer literate and leave a message on our number, and then you would get contacted back, or you can do it online. Either way.
Yeah, now, so if they're a true LES student, we're talking about students now.
Yeah.
I pass their name on to Marianne and Maxine Neely, who is our vice president for the Literacy for English Speakers. And then they get the student assessed, and then they try to find an LES tutor. For ESL students, Jack and I assess them. We have a reading assessment and we have a speaking assessment. And it's a little hokey. I mean, it's not, it's not really thorough. It's nothing as thorough as the Reading Horizons Elevate program. The speaking assessment takes about 15 minutes at most for me, and Jack, I think, takes a little longer. And the reading assessment has 33 questions. So it's not nearly as thorough. But once they've done that, we've assessed their level, and then they go on a waiting list for a tutor. Now, when they get a tutor, if the tutor thinks that Reading Horizons might help them, then we have to address that. We haven't done that too much. There's a few issues involved. One is that each student gets a license, and the license costs money, and we don't have a lot of money. That's
Okay,
the
so that
biggest
was my
issue,
question.
but
Yeah, so
yeah.
I'm an existing tutor with a new student, and my question was really if we determined that this would be helpful for that student, what is the process for getting access to a license for that student?
We're making it up as we go along. You might be
Oh,
the
cool.
first
Okay.
one. Okay.
All right, great.
But yeah, it's a little, I think it's maybe $150 a year or something like that for a license. And
Yeah, it looks like
it's
$199 on their site. So
okay, we get a little bit of a discount. And yeah, and then we need to keep track of it, because if they don't use it, we want to make sure it gets assigned to
Right.
someone else, you know,
Right.
that kind of thing.
So, and then my second question was, you know, more specifically for using this for ESL students, how do you approach teaching and expanding vocabulary while also using this program? Do you approach it in tandem, or do you look at it as two separate but parallel learning paths?
It's part and parcel of the program for common American words. Yeah, I guess that's my only comment on that. Yeah. It's in the lessons, you know, and actually how shall I put it? As they're breaking down a word, there's one part of the program that takes you to what is the meaning of this word, and it can be given in audio. I mean, it will say the word and so forth, or it will tell you what the word means. And then for some other words, as part of the lesson, it takes you to a screen where there's a definition of the word. And of course, like many words in English, they have 3 or 4 meanings. And the student, reads the examples of the word used in a sentence. So it's very strong in that respect. I mean, it's a much better way of learning the word than just, you know, giving a simple definition once. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a couple of hands up. Marinelle, would you give us your question, please?
Yes, for just to follow on with what Bethany said, if for ESL tutors that might be interested in looking at using Reading Horizons, how do those tutors communicate to us that they're interested? I mean, Bethany's expressed interest, but if there's others, how should we do that?
I'll just break in here.
Yeah.
If you ever have a question about anything, the right email to use is sblcoffice@southbayliteracy.org.
Yeah.
That email gets monitored almost every day, sometimes more than once a day. And we do our best to get a response to you quickly. As far as, like I said, we're making up as we go along on this ESL Reading Horizons. So I'm not sure what we're going to do once we know you have a student who's interested. Was that the end of your question, Mary Nell?
No, I had another one. Again, kind of to tag on to what Bethany asked about incorporating Reading Horizons Elevate into an existing ESL curricula for a student. And maybe Marianne might be a good one to, since you've worked with both, I think. I'm thinking like if I work with side by side, is there benefit or is it possible to kind of use both programs at the same time?
Certainly is possible. What I would say is you have to use supplementary materials as well. And you don't, it would there's always something more that to that particular student you might need. I have a LES student who works in a courtroom every day and we needed to work on some Latin and Greek roots because she has to put down words. So we went and found other resources where we could find roots for words that she might commonly find. So that's the kind of supplement that I would think. Remember, this is really, it is a basic program. And in terms of vocabulary, the vocabulary is mostly very simple. You know, every lesson has 20 common words. And these common words are words that you would call sight words because they don't follow the rules of the phonetic skills. So you memorize each lesson, those 20 words, and so that you can just pick them up and say them anytime and you get their meaning at the same time. So you learn those words specifically as words.
Thank you, Marianne. Lainey?
Yes, I have two questions. One is, I've always kind of felt like the student needed to be an more advanced, maybe upper intermediate English speaker to be able to use Reading Horizons Elevate. But do you think the more beginning students who don't speak English well can use it too?
My comment on that would be that if you saw the video and you saw our student on the video, Oi, who was from somewhere in Asia, who was talking about having been here for 12 years or whatever, her English, she's got the patterns, but her accent is really heavy and it's hard to understand her.
Yeah.
And her teacher said, she wasn't doing that well in class before. So you have to notice whether your student is progressing or not. And if what you're doing is working, and helping the student progress in the language, then you're on the right track. But even if somebody's from a foreign country, they may have some kind of a reading disability or be a person whose way of learning needs more intensive structure on things. So that's all I can tell you is that it's sensing your own student. And if you were wanting to have them do the evaluation and find out where they were, I think that might be one way to do it. Is we would assign them for an evaluation, but not for a permanent license.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
So the other question I have is, well, if I want to use this Reading Horizons Elevate for my ESL student, how do I get trained in Reading Horizons Elevate?
I don't have a way to tell you. We don't have regular classes. If we had several people who wanted to learn, then we would have the people for a regular class. And Maxine would put on a regular class. The other thing is I would be happy to mentor anyone. What's interesting about it is that, for me anyway, has been good. I've learned as I went. As you can see, I'm not the most computer literate person in moving things around. But when I started, I was really worse 8 years ago. So I've learned a lot. And I've also learned a lot about the English language that I didn't know before. Just more definitions and more clarity on things. I think I'm much better able now to help people. I'll learn the concept as we go through it and I'll think, oh yeah, that's why that goes there. And then that makes it more interesting for the tutor too. That's all I can say about that.
Thank you, Marianne. Maureen, we skipped you.
Yes, I did want to actually address Bethany's question. And maybe, I don't know, clarify it maybe. If you have a student that you think would benefit from the Reading Horizons Elevate program, I think the process, if anybody can correct me, would be to let the office know through that SBLC office email. And I think to let them know that you're interested in having the program for your student. Then I think the next step would be then, as Lainey suggested, have the student go through an evaluation process. And if it ends up being a right fit, then the third step would be request an assignment of a license. And I think maybe that would simplify the process for you. Does that pretty much answer the question, your original question?
Yeah, that's perfect. That makes absolute sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Marinelle?
Yeah, just one last question. How high of a level does Reading Horizons Elevate take you to? Is it like 12th grade or?
I'd say 12th grade, especially in the reading, you can get as high as the 12th grade.
Okay, thanks.
Wow.
David. David Loomis.
There moved, so I couldn't unmute. It jumped away from me. Anyway, I just want to mention, yeah, I used this program with 2 ESL students several years ago, before the pandemic and everything, actually and during, and it can be used. It is complicated, and this goes to Lainey's question, because foreign language speakers don't have the same vocabulary, so they have trouble with the assessment exam. They have trouble with the reading beyond just the reading skills that are required, because there might be many words in a text which they don't understand and they've never seen before, and the same thing in the instructions or something when they're taking the test. So they can get confused. This can skew the evaluations to a certain extent. But taking into account, you can use it and you work with them on the reading. If you're doing the reading together, as if a person's there doing the reading, you can sometimes tell, or you can maybe set up agree with them that they will ask you when they don't know what a word means, and it could complicate their comprehension, because the questions at the end of each reading supplement often have to do with the context, and if they don't understand the vocabulary, then they could make an error with the question, with the answer. As was pointed out, that does affect the program's evaluation of their reading skills, because they read much more slowly, and it will misinterpret why they're reading slowly. But that's okay, because you don't really care. You may want them to read everything anyway, and if the program grades you as not reading very well, it just makes you read more and more instead of jumping you to the next level. So, but it does work with ESL students. These were both. It's really hard to qualify their level. They were sort of beginning, advanced beginners. Both had lived in the country for many years, but never had really learned English beyond what they learned in the street. So, but it did help them, I think. Unfortunately, they both had to stop for personal reasons, but I continued with one of them, but she decided to move into a GED program instead of just ESL. And so I've been helping her with that a lot.
Thank you, David. Marianne, I think we're towards the end of our session. Do you want to make any last remarks?
Well, I was just really pleased that folks had questions to ask and were interested in it. And it's it's another way that we can help the students in a more broad aspect. I don't think this would be the program to use with someone who is, as Lainey would say, a total beginner, because it would be frustrating for them. Even though you have to have some English to be able to be successful with it. They do have, I don't think we pay for them, but you could. There are an adaptation you can add to your program where all the instruction is given in the native language. So that could help students who have some trouble with that. But right now we don't have them set up to do that. The licenses.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It was really a great presentation. And thank everyone. I'd like to thank everyone who came, and thank you for your comments. Very good to see you all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Very
Marianne.
good.